They call me the first man, the father of humanity, the one who lost everything, the one responsible for pain, for suffering, for death. They say it's my fault the world broke, that because of my weakness, we brought the curse upon all creation. But no one has asked me what I felt. No one wanted to know what was going through my mind in that moment. What I saw, what I thought, why I made the decision that changed everything. If you think you know this story, subscribe now, because what you're about to hear isn't in the books. It's not the version they taught you as a child. It's my truth, the truth of the first man who existed, and the first one who failed. My name is Adam, and this is my confession. The first thing I remember is air filling my lungs for the first time. Not like you breathe now, automatic without thinking, but air that entered like liquid fire, air that made me exist. That made me real, because before that I was nothing. There was no darkness. There was no void. There simply was no me. And then, suddenly, I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was light. Not the light you know. Not that pale light from a window or screen. It was pure light. Light that didn't just illuminate, but revealed. That made every leaf, every grain of sand, every particle of air make sense. And my first thought was simple. I exist. My second thought was even simpler. He's here. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I just knew God was there. His presence filled everything. Not like a weight that crushes, but like air that sustains you. Like light that reveals you. And in that presence there was love. Love so deep it should have destroyed me, but instead completed me. He spoke to me, not with words that vibrate in the air, but with words that resonated inside me. Words written in the very structure of my soul. And he showed me the garden. Eden. How do I describe Eden without it sounding like fantasy? How do I talk about colors that no longer exist? About sounds that were lost when we were expelled? It was absolute perfection. Every tree was an individual miracle. Some seemed to dance even without wind. Others were so ancient they seemed to hold all the secrets of the universe. The fruits. Every bite was an explosion of flavor so intense it made you cry with joy. It wasn't just eating. It was communion. There were 4 rivers, Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates. And each one literally sang. Harmonies so complex you could spend years listening and still discover new melodies. The air had taste of pure life. Each breath was like drinking liquid light, and the animals. God brought them to me one by one and asked me to name them. But it wasn't simply putting random names on them. It was knowing them, looking inside their essence and speaking the name that had always been waiting to be said. The lion came first. I looked in his eyes and saw majesty, strength without arrogance, and the name lion came from my lips as if it had always existed. The eagle, freedom made flesh and feathers, the lamb, meekness that wasn't weakness but peaceful strength. Every animal was a masterpiece, and they all knew me. There was no fear. There was no predator and prey, just shared existence. But while I was naming the animals, something was growing inside me, a strange sensation. Because every creature had a mate, the lion had the lioness. Each animal had another that completed it, and I was alone. Don't misunderstand me. I wasn't sad. God was with me constantly. But there was an incompleteness, as if I were half of an equation, and God knew. It is not good for the man to be alone, he said. I will make a helper suitable for him. Then he made me sleep. But it wasn't like sleeping at night. It was deeper, like being taken apart and put back together. I felt something being taken from me, not just physically, but spiritually. When I woke up, I saw her, Eve. If Eden was perfection, she was that perfection concentrated in human form. But it wasn't just physical beauty. It was recognition, like looking in a mirror and seeing not your reflection, but your soul reflected back. Bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She wasn't my copy. She was my complement. Where I saw straight lines, she saw curves. Where I was strength, she was grace. Different. But we fit together with a perfection that could only be divine. When our eyes met, I knew. I knew I would never be incomplete again. We walked through the garden together, discovering, exploring, not just the place, but each other. Every conversation was an adventure. Every shared silence was deep intimacy. There was no shame. We were naked, but that went beyond the physical. We were completely known, without masks, without fear of judgment, and God walked with us. Every afternoon in the cool of the day, he came. We talked about the garden, the animals, ourselves. He taught us, not as a distant professor, but as a loving father. One day, he took us to the center of the garden, where 2 trees stood out above all the others. The tree of life, was extraordinary. Its leaves glowed with soft golden light. Its fruits seemed to pulse with vitality. "If you eat from this tree," God said, "you will live forever." Then he showed us the second one, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It was beautiful, perhaps more beautiful than the tree of life. Its fruits were perfect, red and bright like rubies, but God looked at us with a seriousness I had never seen before. "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden," he said, "but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat from it, you will certainly die." Die, new word. A concept I didn't understand, but God's tone made it clear it was something final. Terrible. "Why is that tree here?" I asked. God smiled, but there was sadness in that smile. "Because love without choice is not love. I could have made you incapable of disobeying me, but then you would be machines, not children. This tree represents your freedom." I didn't fully understand then. Why would anyone choose to disobey? Why choose death over life? But I should have understood, should have seen the weight of those words. Our days in Eden were impossible to describe. Every moment was discovery. Every experience was new and wonderful. Even I worked in the garden, but it wasn't work as you know it. There was no fatigue. It was like dancing, participating in continuous creation. Eve saw things I didn't see. She noticed details I overlooked. "Look," she would say, pointing at a flower. "See how the petals form a perfect spiral? Each flower is an individual work of art." And I would look, see, and marvel. That was our life. Constant discovery. Deep communion with God, with each other, with all creation. It should have lasted forever. It didn't last. I don't know when the serpent appeared, but one day Eve came back from the garden different. It wasn't obvious. She was still Eve, but there was something in her eyes. A shadow, a question. "A doubt, Adam," she said quietly. "I spoke with the serpent today." My heart tightened. What did it say? Eve hesitated. It asked about the trees. Asked if God really said we can't eat from any of them. "And what did you answer?" "The truth, that we can eat from all of them, except from the tree of knowledge. That God said if we eat from it, we'll die." She paused. "And the serpent said we won't die. Said God knows that if we eat, our eyes will open and we'll be like him, knowing good and evil." The words floated between us like poison. "You will not die. You will be like God." It was a lie. It had to be. God didn't lie. But the seed had been planted. "Eve, the serpent is wrong. God doesn't lie." "I know," she said quickly. Too quickly. "It's just that." "Why is that tree in the center? Where we see it every day?" "Because he loves us. And love requires freedom." "But what if the serpent is right? What if God is keeping something from us?" I should have been stronger. Should have gone straight to God? I didn't. Because part of me was wondering too. The following days were strange. A tension that had never existed. Eve spent time alone. I saw her looking toward the center of the garden, and I started avoiding that area. But questions don't disappear when you ignore them. They grow in the darkness. Then that day came. I was working far away. When I came back, Eve wasn't there. "Eve?" I called. Silence. A silence that felt wrong, because Eden was never truly silent. But in that moment, everything was quiet. As if all creation was holding its breath. "Eve!" And then I saw her, standing near the tree of knowledge. Just looking at it, I started running. "Eve, get away!" She turned, and in her eyes I saw determination and fear. But before I could reach her, she extended her hand and took the fruit. No, too late. She looked at the fruit. Smooth, red, perfect. And maintaining eye contact with me, she brought it to her mouth and bit. The sound was the loudest I had ever heard. Louder than thunder, because it was the sound of the world breaking. For a moment, nothing happened. Eve just stood there, chewing, swallowing. And then her eyes changed. Something in them died. Innocence went out, replaced by knowledge, but not good knowledge. Knowledge of scars. "Adam," she whispered, her voice broken. "Something's wrong." She looked down, and for the first time, she saw her nakedness. Didn't just see it, understood it, and shame was born. She dropped the fruit and crossed her arms over her body. "Adam," tears in her eyes. Something changed. I should have run. Should have gone to God, confessed, begged for mercy. But I only saw Eve, my Eve, bone of my bones, broken, changed, separated from me. She extended the remaining fruit. "Adam," small voice, "I don't want to be alone in this, please." The choice, I could choose obedience, choose God, choose life, but that meant separation from Eve. Or I could choose Eve, not let her face the consequences alone, but that meant disobeying God. I looked at Eve, the tears on her face. I looked at the fruit. I looked at the sky, and I chose. I took the fruit and ate. The taste was bitter, not the fruit itself. But the act I swallowed, and my eyes opened. I saw I was naked. I saw Eve was naked, and for the first time I felt shame. Deep, penetrating, consuming. We need to cover ourselves. We ran to the fig trees. We tore off leaves with trembling hands. We sewed them together clumsily, desperately. The leaves weren't enough. They never would be, because it wasn't just our bodies that needed covering. It was our soul, our guilt, our shame. And then we felt something new, fear, because we heard his voice. Adam, where are you? The voice of God, the same one that had always brought joy. Now it filled me with terror, because I knew what I had done, knew I had broken the only rule. Hide, I whispered, pulling Eve behind a tree. We crouched there, trying to make ourselves invisible. Adam, closer now. And there was something in the voice. Not anger yet, but sadness so deep it could swallow the world. Where are you? I couldn't take it anymore. I'm here, Lord. I heard your voice and was afraid because I was naked. So I hid. Silence. Then he spoke. Who told you that you were naked? Did you eat from the tree? The question. Inescapable, I could confess. Take responsibility. I chose to defend myself. The woman you gave me. She gave me fruit from the tree and I ate. I blamed Eve. I blamed God. As if I had no choice. I felt Eve shrink. Saw the hurt in her eyes. God turned to Eve. What have you done? The serpent deceived me, and I ate. Everyone blaming everyone, and God just stood there. And in him was a pain so deep the universe could shatter. Then he began to speak. First to the serpent. Curses fell. Condemned to crawl. To eat dust. Eternal enmity, and then something strange. I will put enmity between you and the woman. He will crush your head. You will strike his heel. A promise. A prophecy. Hope in the darkest moment. Then to Eve. I will multiply your pains in childbirth. With pain you will give birth. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. I saw Eve fold. Bringing life would be marked by agony, and then to me. Because you listened to your wife and ate, cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it. It will produce thorns. By the sweat of your brow you will eat, until you return to the ground. For you are dust, and to dust you will return, death. Finally I understood. I would return to dust, cease to exist. When he finished, the silence was deafening, and then something unexpected. God approached, and despite everything, he took care of us. Our clothes of leaves were pathetic, already tearing, but God took animals, the first to die, the first time blood was shed, and from their skins he made real clothes. He dressed us with his own hands, the same hands that formed me, that gave life to Eve, that created every star. Now they dressed us in our shame, mercy we didn't deserve. When he finished, he spoke. The man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to take from the tree of life and live forever. Expulsion. Not as additional punishment, but as mercy, because living forever in this state would be hell. He led us toward the eastern edge. Each step was agony. Each step further from home. We reached the boundary. I saw cherubim take positions. Angelic beings with flaming swords, guarding the way. Making sure we could never return, Eve squeezed my hand. So tight it hurt. I looked back. The garden was still there. Still beautiful. Still perfect. But it was no longer ours. Adam. God's voice, softer now. I turned, felt his presence, and in it, despite everything, there was still love. Wounded love. But love. Remember the promise. The woman's offspring will crush the serpent. This is not the end. And then he left. Withdrew his manifest presence. And the void was deeper than any abyss. We stood there, on the border between lost paradise and unknown world. I'm sorry, Eve whispered. So sorry. I held her. Me too. You should have left me. No, you are bone of my bones. I chose to stay with you. Finally we turned, and took the first steps outside Eden. The world beyond was different. Not ugly, but wild. Uncared for harder soil. More random plants. Sharp stones. Thorns. For the first time, uncomfortable heat. Cold. Hunger. Thirst. That first night was the longest. We found a cave. We huddled together for warmth. And for the first time, I felt fear of the dark. What are we going to do? Eve trembled. Survive. We'll learn. Together. And slowly, painfully we learned. I learned to work the ground. Real work. Painful. That left my hands blistered. I planted. Some things grew. Many didn't. And every drop of sweat reminded, by the sweat you will eat bread. Eve learned to prepare food. Make clothes. Create the appearance of home. We found a rhythm. Life. It wasn't Eden. It never would be. But it was ours. Eve became pregnant. I saw the fulfillment of the words. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Nausea, pain, discomfort, and the birth. I'll never forget Eve's screams, pain I couldn't relieve, blood, fear. But then we heard a new sound, a baby's cry, our son. I looked at that small face, and something in me broke and remade itself. There was hope, proof that life continued. Eve held him, tears falling. Cain. Because with the Lord's help I have brought forth a man. With the Lord's help. Despite everything, she still recognized God. And that gave me hope. More children came. Abel, Seth, many others. And with each birth, I saw joy and pain. Joy for the life, pain for the world they would receive. We built. We survived, but we never forgot. I never forgot the garden, the perfection, God's presence. And every day I felt the weight of what I had done. When I saw my firstborn kill his brother. When I saw sin spread. When I saw pain and hatred grow. Every broken thing reminded, you caused this. I carried that weight. But through it all, one thing remained. The promise. The offspring will crush the serpent's head. I didn't fully understand, but I clung to it like a drowning man, because it meant God wasn't finished. That there was redemption coming. Years passed, decades, centuries. I saw humanity create beauty, art, music. I saw them create horror, war, hatred, because it all started with me. But through it all, I learned something. I learned that God is greater than our mistakes, that His love is deeper than our betrayal. I saw when He clothed us instead of destroying us. I saw when He allowed Eve and me to stay together. I saw when He gave children, knowing they would inherit fallen nature. I saw when He kept providing, day after day. And I saw most clearly when I looked into the eyes of my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, each generation carrying the promise. Because the promise wasn't just about crushing the serpent, it was about restoration, about making the broken new. And that promise wasn't just for me, it was for all humanity. It was for you who are listening thousands of years later. You who live in a world still marked by my choice, but also marked by the promise. Let me tell you what I learned the hardest way. The freedom to choose isn't a curse. It's a gift, but with it comes responsibility. When God said don't eat, it wasn't because He wanted to deprive us. It was because He knew what it would cost. He saw not just the act, He saw all the consequences. He saw the suffering. He saw the generations affected, and still, He gave us choice. Because He wanted children, not robots. He wanted genuine love, not programmed obedience. But here's what I didn't understand. True freedom isn't the absence of limits. True freedom is choosing the right limits. In Eden, I had one rule. One. Of all the trees, thousands, only one was forbidden, and that rule wasn't restriction. It was protection. Like a father says, don't touch the fire, not to limit joy. But because He knows it burns, I touched the fire, and I burned not just myself, but everyone after. If I could go back in that moment with the fruit extended, what would I do? Honestly, I don't know, because that choice was about love, loyalty, not wanting her to face it alone. And those aren't bad things, but even good things, when placed above God, become idols. I sacrificed obedience on the altar of my love for Eve, and the price was everything. I'm not saying you shouldn't love. I'm not saying loyalty is wrong. I'm saying there's an order. God first, always, because He's the only one perfectly good, perfectly wise, perfectly loving. When you put anything above Him, you invert the order of creation. And when the order is inverted, everything crumbles. I know. I lived it. But I also know, even when everything crumbles, God is still there. Not with condemnation, but with mercy. Not with, I told you so, but with, let me help you rebuild. Years after the expulsion, I would look east at sunset. I would see, in the distance, the glow of the flaming swords, guarding the way, and my heart ached. Not just for the lost perfection, but for the presence, for the intimacy with God. One day, Eve found me there. You miss the garden. Every day. Me too. But you know what I miss more? Feeling that everything was right. That we could be in His presence without fear. The promise. He promised the offspring would crush the serpent. It has to mean restoration. But when? I don't know. But I trust that He keeps His promises. And that became my anchor. Through all the hardships, the promise. God wasn't finished. There were more chapters to be written. And now, you live in a time where some of those chapters have already been written. You know the offspring came. That the price was paid. That the way back was opened. Not through flaming swords, but through a sacrifice greater than I could imagine. So what will you do? Will you waste it? Ignore it? Presume upon it? Or will you value it with the gratitude of someone who knows exactly how much it costs to lose God's presence? Let me tell you, there's nothing, absolutely nothing worth trading for his presence. Not knowledge, not pleasure, not even love for another person. Because in the end, when everything is taken away, when the body fails, only one thing remains: your relationship with the one who created you. And if it's broken, you have a void that nothing else can fill. I know. I lived with that void for centuries. Yes, God still provided. Yes, he still sustained my life. But it wasn't the same. It was no longer those walks in the cool of the day. There was always distance, always awareness that something had been broken. And that's the true curse of sin. Not the physical consequences, but the separation, the distance. But here's the good news that took me centuries to understand. God doesn't want you to remain in that distance. The promise he made at the judgment was a promise of reconciliation. Not just about defeating the enemy, but about restoring the relationship. About making a way back not to the physical garden, but to his presence. And if you have access to that way, and you do, then don't ignore it. Don't think you have infinite time. Don't think other things are more important. Don't make the mistake I made of putting anything above God, because in the end, nothing else matters. That's the lesson that took me 930 years to fully learn. Choose God, always, in every situation. Every temptation, every decision, not because he needs your obedience, but because you need him more than air, more than life itself, because he's not just creator, he's home, peace, everything you were made to have. And when you have him, you have everything. And when you don't have him, you have nothing, even if you possess the whole world. I lost Eden, but I learned what truly mattered. And if my story, my fall, my pain, my long journey of repentance can save even one person from making the same mistake, then perhaps it wasn't all in vain. Because God is so great, he can use even our most terrible mistakes to teach the deepest truths. So here at the end of my confession, let me leave you with this. Don't wait until you lose paradise to appreciate God's presence. Don't wait until you're expelled to value walking with him. Don't wait until everything is broken to learn to trust. Learn now, while you still have time, while you still have choice. Because believe me when I tell you, there is nothing worth losing communion with God. When you lose him, you lose everything. But when you have him, even in the wilderness outside Eden, you still have hope. You still have purpose. You still have life. I am Adam, the first man, the first to fail, but by God's grace, not the last to be redeemed. And neither do you have to be. The choice, as always, is yours. Choose wisely, because choices have weight. More weight than you can imagine, I know. I've carried it for 930 years, but I also know this. God is strong enough to carry that weight with you, to walk with you through the consequences, to not abandon you even when you fail. So don't give up. No matter where you are in your story, no matter what choices you've made, God is still there. Still calling, where are you? Not to condemn you, but because he's looking for you. Because he loves you. Because he wants to walk with you again. Not in Eden. That's lost. But in something potentially even better. In a relationship forged not in innocence, but in grace. Not in perfection, but in redemption. That's the promise. That's the plan. That's the ending God is writing. And if I, the first sinner, can be part of that plan, you can too. Just say yes. Just trust. Just choose God not once, but every day, every moment. And you'll discover what I should have discovered that day in the garden. That obeying God isn't losing your freedom. It's finding it. That following him isn't restriction. It's liberation. That trusting him isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength you'll ever know. That's my story. That's my confession. That's my testimony, and I pray it helps you write yours. With wisdom I didn't have. With trust I didn't exercise. With faith in the God who never gives up, even on the worst of us. Especially on the worst of us, because that's when his grace shines brightest. Go now. Live differently. Choose better. And remember, the story doesn't end with failure. Not when God is writing it. He always has the last word. And his last word is always love.